All right, I'm going to do this live. We'll see if anyone shows up and we'll record. I'm trying to post this in the Discord. Okay. Just gonna make this a little smaller. There. Nope. Okay. Oops. Adjusting my things. Okay, I'll give it a little bit of time and then probably start this thing off. Move this over. Okay. Just a few things here. All right. I think we are good to go. See if anyone joins up. And then, oh, look, I've got a single person. Hello. It's my first time doing this, so I'm still learning all this stuff, but I'll be recording. So yeah, I've been wanting to try live streaming a while. I've just, so anyway, I want to talk about, just get some live feedback, see how this goes, talk about some of the work I'm going to be trying to be doing on custom armies. So I'll give everyone a bit of background on me. So I started doing custom armies, I think, in 2024, where also just to make sure, I guess y'all can hear me. So that's good, you know. But yeah, I started to work on them in 2024. I did a lot of competitive redesigns. I'm going to pull those up. And from there, I was able to wiki. I'm going to pull that up. Wiki. Here we are. All right. So let me go here. Okay. So from here, to give a perspective, I did a lot of videos in 2024 where I worked on a lot of competitive redesigns. So these are the full list of them. So with 3.5 coming out, you know, I didn't care for 3.5, but honestly, I was probably going to rework my redesigns anyway. So I think whether I liked 3.5 or didn't like 3.5, I was still kind of going towards the going towards redesigning it. So one thing about 3.5 that I think for me is a great opportunity is instead to just focus what I think my first sets of redesigns here are more sort of working up weaker armies, things like Dao Union, armies like maybe Change Disciples, Custodians, and some of the disciples. I also my biggest change was Knight Brothers and Inquisition, where I combined them. So and then Jackals too. So I did a lot of work to try to make these armies more competitive. I called them competitive reasons. I did like YouTube channels on them years ago, but yeah, I haven't touched it in a while. I've been waiting for 3.5 to come out, and I've been giving a lot of thought about what, you know, like what is the plan for myself, and I work with others just to work on competitive redesigns. So with 3.5 being a lot different than what I imagined it to be, I think I wanted to expand. The thought process for me is well, I might as well just expand the scope of my redesigns to now include all armies. And from there, from that point, I wanted to, I can sort of redesign things a lot better. Like my previous iterations, I didn't work on things like alien hives. I didn't work on, some of the armies that I felt were pretty good, robot legions, sisters, orcs and goblins, because I felt those armies were good. But now, sort of that, like all the armies have changed. I feel it's an opportunity for the competitive side of One Page Rules community to say, let's just look at all the armies as a whole. So, with that in mind, here I'm gonna just pull up some big points that I'll show on the Discord that I shared on my Discord and give you guys some thoughts about like what I'm thinking about doing. And y'all can respond in text. Like I said, I've never really done this before, so if I do something weird, let me know and be like, hey, this isn't how other people do it. Anyway, so with that in mind, I have a few big points. The first thing I think that has always been an issue in one page rules has been the hybrid tax. And there's been a lot of discussions about how to deal with the hybrid tax. That some armies are just kind of more efficient than others. Now, in my previous iterations on things, what I did is actually just I used the way I was solving it in other editions without working on them as a whole. Is I was like looking at like pistols, and I was looking at things, and I was like, so here I've got some assault brothers, and one thing I was doing is I was providing a limited on these pistols. I was saying, well, a great way to make these assault brothers more efficient is to give them the limited. That's going to greatly reduce their pistols while still making that. But one thing I thought about is that since we'll kind of be looking at all the redesigns as a whole, why not just apply a similar version level of hybridization to just all armies? So like then the hybrid tax would sort of be applied evenly across every army. And then you wouldn't even have to have rules like the assault rule. The armies would just sort of all be equally share in one manner or another. Like in other words, all of them would sort of have a certain level of hybrid tax. And so it wouldn't matter if, since all armies sort of have a similar version of a hybrid tax, then all of a sudden there's no that isn't a competitive advantage. So I started to do this in a couple of ways. The first, I looked at three armies. I looked at High Elf fleets, I looked at alien hives, and I looked at battle brothers. So let's look at alien hives. I think when I think of an army that is sort like, in other words, I think alien hives is the reason we talk about the hybrid tax, because this army is so streamlined and so efficient. That's sort of like, in other words, it's almost like this one army is the reason we even have to have hybrid tax discussions. So my thought was, well, why don't, when we redesign these as a whole, just add a certain level of hybrid tax to their units? So like I pulled up the Hive Lord here, and what I've done here is I've applied some spine launchers to them. Now, like this actually would provide them some flexibility, but it's also sort of putting all armies on the same level where it's saying like all armies have a certain level of hybridization. So like the hive lords now are going to have these spine launchers. Now that doesn't mean that all armies have to have a hybrid text. Like assault grunts are some of these ones that, they don't have hybrid weapons. Still things like snatchers, I think. Um, Snatchers as well, also, where the guys. So you don't need to make you don't need to make everything a hybrid unit, but instead you can. This is where it's probably going to come to a bit of balance work about providing enough of a hybrid tax so that a person can't just bring the most efficient unit. So, like, for instance, for alien hives, I was thinking, why not apply this hybrid tax to some of their bigger units, like the Hive Lord, like the where is it at? The Ravenous Beast. So in the Ravenous Beast, I've given them a small hybrid tax. Now that does give them some flexibility, but I think if you start doing this from a holistic perspective, all of a sudden the rules can stay simple. We don't have to start adding in special rules like the assault rule. We can just say, in this kind of new version of competitive redesigns, everyone is sort of at that same efficiency level. So that's the first thing that in some of my redesigns I've thought about doing. Any thoughts? I don't know if I have two people. Hey, Josh. Hello. Tabletop night. Um, anyway, so that's some first thoughts that I had. Let me actually just go and tweak something here. I need to go into settings. Where's that at? I'm trying to fiddle with my setup right now. Just give me a second. Okay. And then I need to go to dock. I'm just going to tweak things here. And then I'm going to go to. Oh, that's cool. Very cool. I'll be heading up to North Carolina in a few weeks. I'm going to go play at the tournament at Atomic Empire. So I'm going to be meeting Alpha Nerd. I'll be playing up there. So I think it may just be the last hurrah for 3.4. Oh, cool. That's awesome. You're running it. Well, I'll see you in a few weeks, man. That's awesome. Okay. So we got that going. Yeah. So that's the first sort of big kind of item I've had on my docket is addressing the hybrid tax. Now, this is going to involve effectively redesigning all armies. So the three armies that I looked at, one of them was Alien Hives, where I've really just taken, and this can be tweaked. Just, it's the first version. I'm not saying this is the final, but the idea of like on some of these key units, like the Ravenous Beasts, and I did this on like the Shadow Hunter, where I just added this little, and it's like it does have some use to it, but it's sort of what I've seen a big problem with OPR previously is that like a lot of the armies are sort of designed at it feels sometimes at like different stages of a long period of time. So I'm trying to do more of that idea about like consolidating it all into a single thing. I'm just gonna make sure that I'm good to go. Basic costs to be done by the player through warrior options. Someone's replying to my Discord. Just check on that. Yeah, I think so. I mean, so I'll show you my other option. One thing I worked on was Battle Brothers. So part of this changing of this hybrid tax is also we no longer have to have. So one thing I did is in my reworks, there's no longer any limited. I never liked limited on pistols. It was sort of the best thing. So now by applying a hybrid tax sort of across all armies, you no longer have to worry about like making pistols limited. Now, like I just set as like a general standard sidearm. So now assault units, they can just have regular pistols. I did want to set them at like a 9-inch range, just sort of to give an advantage to things like shotguns. So that's a tweak. Like I said, I may go back and forth with that. But the idea is that by applying a hybrid tax to everyone universally, every army is going to have some units that are super efficient and some units that aren't as efficient, but it all sort of should kind of um, bound together. So, like for instance, the assault, like a lot of the Marines I have in here, um, don't have hybrid taxes, but then you've got like what is it, like the destroyers. So the destroyers don't, they can still go their dual claw. So in other words, every army should have a certain level of both super efficient units and some units that are sort of required to have what I would call a combined arms lists. And that, in other words, hopefully the plan is that all armies are sort of hit in a general manner the same at the hybrid tax. So every army should sort of be equal. Then I worked on high elf fleets, and the same thing. I went back to just looking at like applying just a sidearm pistol to all the units. I feel doing it this way is a lot cleaner as well. So that's the first sort of big point that I'm thinking about. I'll just wait people by. There's another thing I wanted to talk about as well. So there's a few big points. I'm just actually just put this on. I'm just going to put this on like a text document. So I have to go back and forth. Give me a second. We're very professional here. That's what we are. We are professional. Okay. Can I do this? Okay, great. Here we go. I'm just going to, okay, great. And then make this bigger. All right. So that's the first thing. Address the hypertext. The next thing I thought about, and this is sort of similar, is ambush. I think with a lot of the new rules, ambush has become a lot weaker, I think. Especially with the advent of sort of progressive scoring coming in. I think that ambush, I'm not saying you can't have every unit, but more units I would prefer if ambush was just like an upgrade instead of like automatically being applied to that. So that's more of a minor thing. I think that some units can keep like ambush, but I don't want like I've noticed this in the past where some armies ambush is like optional on a lot of units, and some units ambush is sort of bundled into everything. So that's the next point. The next point is the removal of surprise attack and tunneler. And when you can remove surprise attack and tunneler, it actually just remove warning cry. So I added warning cry as a way to counter surprise attack. But if you like theoretically, if I redesign armies all as a whole, all armies can basically lose surprise attack and tunneler, and then warning cry doesn't matter, so you can sort of remove that as well. Like I've never, I really don't like this dynamic. I don't like warning cry, in the sense that it's like a hard counter. So I think that if you just have ambush, then you can deal with ambush through tactics, and rather than just like buying an upgrade that's warning cry. That happened in the tournament a lot, where some people were just spamming warning cry and were like just screwing armies with like ambush. So that's another thought. Is I don't think that I don't think you, if you get rid of surprise attack and tunneler, then you don't have to have warning cry as well. So that's another kind of thought process. This is also something that I've noticed in Grimdark Future that I notice a lot more in Age of Fantasy, that Age of Fantasy is a lot better about spreading out. There's a lot of like AP2 and AP3 in addition to like AP1. There's actually not a lot of AP4 in Age of Fantasy. And I think that is a better design system. One thing that Grimdark Future does that's tough is this a ton of AP1. This is a ton of AP1. And the thing is, AP1's pretty weak. There's a lot of units that have a 2-up armor save, Custodians and Prime Brothers. If you put them in cover, AP1 doesn't matter because that cover is going to negate the AP1. AP1's pretty weak. And then there's a lot of AP4, and AP4 is, I generally say, is a pretty bad rule in mass because you basically can just ignore cover. When you have a lot of AP4, all of a sudden terrain and cover don't matter because you can just blow through it. So what I'd love to do is try to take a lot of weapons. Now there's going to stay some AP1 and AP4, but I'd love to take a lot of units and a lot of weapons and try to move some AP1s up to AP2s and some AP4s down to AP3s. Then all of a sudden cover becomes a lot more important, and then enough weapons hit hard enough that a prime brother with 2 up armor save and cover um is still going to like take a bit of a damage. So that's my thought process behind, and especially in Grimdark Future where shooting is a lot more prominent. In Age of Fantasy, AP isn't as big of a deal because they're just not as much shooting. But in Grimdark Future, there's a lot of shooting, and that means how cover interacts now with 3.0 is this is one of those things that I really don't like where 3.0 went. Um, kind of mitigated by the fact that you have to wait. Yeah. So that's another thing someone says in the Discord chat is that, yeah, I mean, ambush is, I feel, pretty balanced, especially when you start playing at a little higher point total. Ambush is good. That's the reason that I don't want ambush to all of a sudden be so automatic. Give people some flexibility to bring some units that don't have to have ambush tacked onto everything. Especially if these units, like for instance, Battle Brothers is a great example of their destroyers. I don't think should have ambush native, because if you look at their destroyers, you can run these guys with like assault rifle. You can run these guys with basically long range weapons where you're kind of double paying for your ambush. So there's definitely some units that'll keep ambush, but there's a lot of units that because destroyers can fit such a large different amount of roles. I think ambush should be optional on them. So that's why I have it as an optional upgrade. It's a good point in the Discord. Okay, so that's the first thing. Removing ambush, taking AP1s and AP4s, bringing them more to that midline. So this is the thing I've talked about, is that basically take a lot of combat units, move them down to like I actually thought about standardizing all close combat units. I may go back on that. In other words, on my Battle Brothers, I may actually give them like heavy pistols. This is just the first version, so maybe I add them. This is stuff I really am going to have to start like playing with points a bit and seeing where things are. But that's something that the idea is I like the 9-inch pistol because it's a little less effective. In other words, people with 12-inch guns, like your shotguns or like a lot of those weapons, now have that decided advantage over close combat units because you get that extra 3 inches of range. So I like that idea where you're making close combat units like sort of lean in a little more toward their close combat effectiveness. So that's that thought. Where's my? Oh, here it is. Okay. So another thing for bookkeeping went back and forth about a lot, but basically, I think that at least for my own sanity's sake, I'm just going to have Prime Brothers and no variants. I don't like a lot of the Prime Brother variants. I think that people who've painted their Prime Brothers a particular chapter can just use them as Prime Brothers. I don't. I think that it's just, to me it's way too complicated to try to not only deal with um to deal with Battle Brothers, but now you're also dealing with with all the prime. Like, let's just go look at the Prime Brothers here, and I'll show you what I mean. So, like Prime Brothers, like all of these extra Prime Brothers. I don't think that all these sub Prime Brother factions really add anything. They don't. They're not, to me. They're not worth it. It's just better just to have Prime Brothers. There's also things like Night Prime Brothers that I just don't think fit. So, so that's the other idea. Is that for simplicity's sake, I think that'll actually simplify things a lot from balance. Is you just have Prime Brothers. The last other thing that I'm thinking about is an ally system. So I am thinking primarily Prime Brothers and Battle Brothers are able to. I need to work out the details. I'm not sure if I want to provide a limitation on if just in other words, just maybe just allow 25% of certain factions to be put in there. That's like roughly what I'm thinking is like maybe like a Prime Brother army can bring 25% of Battle Brothers. Like I don't know, maybe it's 33%. Um that's my thought. I think this would be a big help to orcs and goblins. Um, that was a big change that I really didn't care for, splitting up orc marauders with goblin reclaimers. Um, I feel that both of the armies are incomplete. And you've sort of added on a lot of extra units in both armies that I think are kind of like superfluous. So I'll probably keep both of the armies, um, but just allow maybe a level of because there's a lot of orc players who they have a lot of like kilocans. I think 40k. There's a lot of stuff like kilocans or like tanks and stuff, and there's also just a like Gretchen that yeah. I also just think the Goblin Reclaimers is just it's just not a good army. It doesn't really fit well. So that may kind of alleviate that. There's one other thing that I've gone into, and I didn't have it on my notes, and I've been working on it, and that is where is it at? One of the things that I've been looking at is tightening up. If so, I'll say this: a lot of my redesigns are based off. They are based off requiring 25, minimum ratio, both sides for the lances. Each side has to contribute at least, yeah. So we got some from the Discord. It's saying something similar. I think that what lol what I hope I'm saying it correct is saying it's about right. I think somewhere between a 75-25 split, maybe it's 66-33, something in there. I mean, I don't know. Um, the other thing that I've been thinking about is because it's competitive play, I have been looking at adding in a certain level of force org. So what I've done here is that I've done this to the three armies I've built where I've added in kind of a rare special rule and a very rare. So in this very rare, you can only bring one unit for every full 1,500 points. So if I'm looking at competitive play, I think that's something that I'd be interested in implementing. I wanted to see what people think about that, where you actually have like, in other words, hive lords, you can only bring one. You have to bring two, you'd have to be 3,000 points. So that's going to stop people from like bringing double or triple hive lord at 2,000 points. And then there's also just rares that's going to stop spamminess. I think some of the imbalances in OPR come from the fact that um the like some of these units can like don't have to be so we can put some limits. So like for instance, the what do I have it on here? On the burrower, I've added in just very rare on that. So you can't have just these big, tough 18 or tough 15. I actually did this. I think I was doing it on, I didn't save this version, but I was actually looking at doing it on my high elf fleets here. So this is the high elf fleets that I was working on. And what I actually did is I started to add in rares. So a rare is one unit every 1,000 points. So at 2,000 points, you could bring two of the units. At 3,000 points, you can bring three. So that's just going to provide a little more limitations on not getting some of the spamminess that's happened, I think, in the past. So that's something as well I'm looking at doing is adding in a rare, very rare, and then a unique. So unique is already in the rules where I've added on things like the Avatar of War is now just unique. You can only bring one per army. I, I'm so just so you know, I'm kind of a third, fourth, fifth edition 40k guy, and I've always loved the Force organization chart. And I've one thing I think I've played several games like One Page Rules and some other ones like Kings of War, where their force organization is very loose. And all it does, especially when I talk about competitive play, it just sort of opens up armies to be very spammy. Um, just so you know, if you're playing casually, you could just ignore these rules. But like a lot of the rules I'm trying to work on, I'm trying to develop them from a tournament pack perspective so that people can take these armies, they can bring them to a tournament, and everyone sort of understands that there's going to be a bit of a tighterness in what you can bring. In two of my tournaments that I've ran, I've added in some, I feel some modest restrictions, and I felt those tournaments went better because you weren't getting some of like the craziness that was happening here. So anyway, that's another thought process about it. So I've talked a lot. Um, I'm going to. That's sort of the main points here that I wanted to cover in this one. He's saying beyond the heroes with war gear options, it was spammy in the game. Is that most armies use duplicates of heroes? So I'm getting something from my Discord that's saying opening up psyker options beyond heroes with war gear options. One of the things that feels spammy in the game is that most army has to use duplicates of heroes given a cat. Yeah, I mean, so um one of the things that I've done in some of my previous redesigns is, and I'll probably do this for a lot of them, and this is a great example where I actually pull the caster into a separate unit. One of the things that I haven't liked, and this is what I'm going to probably do for a lot of the armies, where you have like, I always call like a higher quality character who's sort of a leader combat character. And then you've got what I call is sort of um, a dedicated telepath. I don't like the idea in most armies where you've got this souped up guy who can do a whole lot. I like the idea in most armies of splitting up the caster and splitting up the regular guy into its own unit. And generally the caster is weaker. So in this particular case, you can get caster 3 or 4, but it's on like a quality 4 def 5 guy. I did this a lot in my Battle Brothers redesigns too, where I'm breaking up a caster. So here I've got a mage destroyer and a mage brother, but you can see that mage brother doesn't have access to some of like the really powerful, like he can't get like a power fist. So the idea being in all the armies, the mage version for most is going to be a little weaker. Now that's not the case for alien hives. Like all armies, I feel can be a little different. So in my version of Alien Hives, the Hive Lord can still be a caster 3. Like I think, in other words, you don't have to make all the armies the same. I think that the caster, that can be like an advantage that Alien Hives gets, is that they are the one army that maybe can have this really powerful hand-to-hand caster, like just as an example. So that's something that I have been looking at. Like I think, excuse me, high elf fleets. I did add some caster support where so high elf fleets, one of the things I did is an upgrade for the strikers and defenders. I wanted these guys to have a bit of a better place. I gave them a spell warden upgrade where they can pick a caster and give it +1 to its next casting roll. Like I really felt that defenders and strikers were, I wanted them to have a role, and I felt them as sort of supports for casters can be a nice additional role for these units to be played. Like in other words, it's a reason to bring a striker or a defender unit instead of just paying extra points and bringing like bringing like the elite versions like the Avengers. So that's the other thing I think you can do a lot. You can play with upgrades. Okay, the idea being every one of my armies, I want every unit in that army to feel like it's worth bringing, that it has its place in the dynamics. So like if you like, I did this with like a lot of and some of the armies that like Dow Union, I did a lot of work with Dow Union to make every unit I feel very beneficial. um I'm probably going to be basing a lot of my armies still off, broadly speaking, 3.4 versions of the army, and then I'll be maybe incorporating some of the 3.5 in there. That's kind of my thought process. Um, so yeah, that's some of the things that are going on. I'm trying to like follow. Yeah, so there's the caster option. So like, so just generally speaking, the reason I'm doing is I like broadly speaking where 3.4 is. I think some improvements can happen in the 3.4 versions of the armies, but I'm not really interested in all these universal special rule stuff. That's just like not, I don't know. It's not quite where I feel that like I have to say that like 3.5 has gotten better. I think that it started out really like really crazy. They do seem to be like, bringing it back in. But I just like I really feel that OPR has done a lot of great work to improve the army builder. Why not for me take advantage of that? So um so a few broad points is that a lot of my battle brothers are going to stay very similar to what they were in 3.4. And then like I said, I'll look at the 3.5 books where the upgrades are that I feel are beneficial. I'll bring them in, but I feel that the battle brothers right now, the current ones and the redesigns are going to stay very similar to what they were in 3.4. All right, so I did this as a live stream. I want to see if anyone have any questions, because like I could have recorded a video, but I also wanted to I wanted to practice live streaming because I'm not really I'm not like technical about that. The other thing is I'd love to get some feedback. If anyone has any thoughts, just let me know. If not, I'm probably going to it's about 40 minutes, so I give people a chance to respond, and then I'll be looking at doing another one of these in the future. Just so come to the Discord. Let me know your thoughts. I'm going to be reworking. I'm going to be working on some of these designs. I'd like to have a full set of redesigns by the end of the year. That's being. I don't know if I can get that. I don't know, but I would love to have first drafts of all armies in OPR as a way. And the plan is I'd love to maybe by the end of the year run a tournament of just the competitive redesigns, and then hopefully get some feedback from that and say, okay, this is what went wrong, this is what went right, and yeah, hopefully just put those on the wiki. So I'll be putting these here on the wiki. I'll be updating them. And so if you do like these armies, I may make a backup version, but probably just so you know, these armies are all going to be replaced and tweaked. So like, just keep that in mind. If there's a particular army that you really like in its current form, I can like send it to you. So just keep that in mind. All right, I'm gonna just in case I'll have some people typing, and then we'll see if we get any other questions, and then I will let everyone go. I appreciate everyone joining. Looks like 5 people came, so that's good for me, I guess. I don't know. Let's see if anyone responds here, and we'll go to. I guess we'll go to like 7:45. How's everyone doing? How's your weekend doing? Hope everyone has got some games lined up for the weekend. That would be fun. I've been, just so you know, here, I am working. Hopefully, I can show you. I am working on my. Can I share this here? I'm working on my drop zone commander stuff right now. Can I do this here? Look, I'm working on a little drop zone commander stuff right now. So that's what my hobby is. That's what I'm working on right now. I love these Shaltari War Striders. Like, they are so cool. Hopefully you can see that. Probably not. I'll post pictures. But I've been digging out, and I had to. I started to paint some of this Shaltari like 13 years ago, so I had to strip them. So I've stripped a lot of my. So some of the stuff I started painting, I had to like strip them out, and digging out and starting to kind of paint my Shaltari. I've got some of these. Look at these freaking gates! Like, these drop zips for Shaltari are so cool. Like, the little things, really nice. So. I'm looking forward to playing some Drop Some Commander. That's going to be really fun. Testing 3.5. Dow player, it's rough. Dow has never been great, and I just fundamentally disagree with what like I think there's just a disconnect. They don't understand, like, I don't know. This is what I will say. A lot, like, you cannot play this game without some sort of hand-to-hand option. And I actually have spent a lot of time working on Dow because Dow, I played actually I played both on my channel and not on my channel. I've played Dow, and I felt my redesign. I've had to actually buff them several times because, like, it's a really weak army, and I felt that the redesign for Dow just didn't. It sort of doubled down on some of the problems, which is that you can't have an army in this game that only shoots. Like, it doesn't work. Um, you have to have the ability to push through a unit. It doesn't mean that Dow have to be combat monsters, but you've got to give Dow all armies have to have a hand-to-hand component. And so um, when I've heard people discuss Dow and said, "Oh, they're just a shooting army," well, it just doesn't work. Like, I think their mechanic as well is undertuned, which is that spotlight mechanic. It doesn't work. Like, I will tell you, like, that spotlight mechanic is really bad. It's so much about OPR in a game is decided by turn two, and, like, when you have an ability that goes off on a 4 up, it's like all it takes is 25%, and then you've basically lost the game. So feel better in the shooting army, hit and run tactics, marking units for here. So I would say that, like, I do like having hit and run as a limited upgrade, but I don't think that hit and run as an army wide rule is a really good idea. That's I think that is one of the things that I think I want to do. This is my thought. I want all armies. I want you to be able to, in a term, to bring sort of an all comers list and not have, quote, bad matchups. I think one of the things about 3.5 that I worry about is that I feel there's going to be more kind of lopsided, kind of good matchups and bad kind of counter matchups. We had a little of that in 3.4, like, especially with, like, Wolf Brothers, who had the counterattack, and you'd have people bring in, like, Damon armies that have no shooting, and it's like an automatic loss. I worry that in 3.5 there's going to be more of that. There's going to be more of that rock paper scissors. I think the goal is to be able to design armies so that you have less of the rock paper scissors matchup. Now, one of the things that oh yeah, Dower just a bad. I mean, I think my version of them, they're better, but yeah, I think that if assault was a weapon keyword prior to debuffs, but um I've had a lot of thought processes about the assault. Like, in other words, like, the assault, I don't think that the assault should be put into the base rules. My goal here is that I would rather deal with a lot of the hybrid text issues through army list design, because, like, assault is like, I love the idea of the custom. What are they called? Advanced actions. But I know a lot of competitive players who just don't like them. It's just too much. And I don't think they're necessary. I think that with good army list design, you don't need to have the assault keyword on there. I've actually done a lot of calculating on how the assault would work, and it never pans out. Like, the assault keyword and all that, and how it's pointed, it's never panned out for me. I was never, and I did calculations and stuff. I think for me, the best way to deal with what we would consider to be the hybridization, in other words, some units just being more expensive through is just like applying that in a broad stroke equally across all armies. And I don't mean to make that armies all the same, but to apply it on certain units and give armies um, certain units that are efficient and certain units that are non-efficient and hybrid. And the goal being that all armies basically bring a similar amount of hybrid tax into everything, and then the rules don't have to change. Um, I think to me that's the best way to handle it. I've yet to come up with a good calculation. Um, Another thing that I think that the North Carolina Joshua, I'm looking forward to playing. I want to play in this tournament because it's got a 3,000 point, but it's also, and I saw this on Alpha Nerd's channel. They have a 500 point sideboard that I actually want to try this out. I'm thinking about trying this out in my next tournament. To having like I really like what they're doing in North Carolina, where they have that 2,500 points and that 500 point sideboard. So that's something I'm thinking about as well. There's a rule called Quick Shot. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't mind Quick Shot. Quick Shot's fine. It's okay. I think that. I think that's fine. Anyway, so that's some of the things. We're getting close to 8 o'clock. Appreciate everyone's time. I'm going to be setting this up again. And like I said, if you want to be part of this, go on my Discord. These are just some initial thoughts, but the goal being is that I feel that I don't mind where 3.5 is going. I don't mind that if you want to play a bit of that sort of wonkiness in your game, there's nothing wrong with that. Like, have fun. I want to design this purely from a competitive standpoint. And so anyway, guys, thank you so much for your time. I hope that you've gotten a little better idea of what I'm thinking. And thanks everyone. I'm going to drop. So everyone, thank you so much.